I built a pharmaceutical empire after my husband died. Then, my son tried to steal it all by declaring me incompetent. He thought I was just a weak old woman until I revealed the DNA test that destroyed his entire claim to my company. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of the Hargrove estate. Meredith Hargrove stood at the bay window of her study, watching as workers set up white tents on the sprawling grounds below. At 72, she still commanded the straight-backed posture that had become her trademark in boardrooms across New England. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant twist, and though fine lines mapped her face, her blue eyes remained sharp and clear. Today marked the 30th annual Hargrove Pharmaceuticals Company picnic, a tradition she had started the year after her husband Thomas died, when she'd taken over their small specialty pharmacy and vowed to transform it into something that would make him proud. 30 years, she whispered to herself, touching the window glass. We did it, Thomas. The estate intercom buzzed, interrupting her moment of reflection. Mrs. Hargrove, came Eleanor's familiar voice. Your son Warren has arrived. He's asking to speak with you before the other guests arrive. Meredith sighed. Warren was always early, not out of enthusiasm, but because he believed it gave him an advantage. Send him to the study, Eleanor. Thank you. She moved to her desk, a magnificent cherry wood piece that had belonged to Thomas. From here, she could see the Hargrove Pharmaceuticals campus in the distance, 5 modern buildings nestled against Vermont's Green Mountains. What had begun as a desperate widow's attempt to keep her family afloat had grown into a regional powerhouse worth millions, employing over 300 people and pioneering affordable treatments for rare diseases. The door opened without a knock. Warren Hargrove strode in, his tall frame impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, despite the casual nature of the day ahead. At 51, he had the confident bearing of a man accustomed to being listened to, his dark hair showing distinguished touches of gray at the temples. Mother, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, you should be resting. The event planners can handle everything. I'm perfectly fine, Warren, Meredith replied firmly. Dr. Levine cleared me for normal activity weeks ago. Warren's expression tightened. A stroke is hardly something to dismiss, he said, his voice carrying a condescending tone. The board members are concerned. Frankly, so am I. Meredith moved around her desk, maintaining the height advantage of standing while Warren had yet to be invited to sit. It was a minor episode, not a stroke, and I've provided the board with my complete medical report. Yes, well, Warren glanced at his watch. Speaking of the board, that's partly why I wanted to see you. Zenith Pharmaceuticals has increased their offer for our research division significantly. Meredith's spine stiffened. We've discussed this, Warren. The research division isn't for sale at any price. Mother, Warren said with exaggerated patience, you're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. The rare disease market is unpredictable. Zenith is offering guaranteed profits. And what happens to the patients who rely on our affordable medications? Meredith asked quietly but powerfully. What happens to the 15 years of research into treatments that might not be blockbusters but change lives? Warren waved his hand dismissively. Zenith would maintain production of existing medications. Until they don't, Meredith countered. I built this company on Thomas's belief that healthcare isn't just about profit margins. And that philosophy made sense 30 years ago, Warren replied, his voice sharp as a knife. Times have changed. We need to evolve. The tension between them was interrupted by another buzz from the intercom. Mrs. Hargrove, Graham has arrived with the marketing team to finish setting up the display boards. Thank you, Eleanor, Meredith responded, grateful for the interruption. Tell him I'll be right down. Warren's jaw tightened at the mention of his younger brother. Graham should be focusing on the quarterly marketing report, not playing event coordinator. Your brother understands that company culture matters, Meredith said calmly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I should greet the team. As she moved toward the door, Warren called after her. We'll need to revisit the Zenith offer after the picnic. The board is expecting a decision by month's end. Meredith paused at the threshold. The board serves at my discretion, Warren. Not the other way around. She left without waiting for his response. The late June sun warmed the grounds as Meredith made her way toward the activity area. Employees were beginning to arrive with their families, creating a cheerful buzz of conversation. This was what she loved most, seeing the human impact of what she'd built. Not just products and profits, but livelihoods and community. "Mom!" Graham's voice called out from near the display tables. At 42, Graham was the image of his father, same warm brown eyes, same easy smile. Where Warren had Thomas's height and ambition, Graham had inherited his kindness and steady nature. He jogged over, dressed casually in khakis and a polo shirt with the company logo. "You shouldn't be carrying those heavy boards," he said, concern evident in his expression. "I'm not made of glass," Meredith replied with a smile. "The doctor said light activity is good for me." Graham studied her face. "You look tired. Did Warren already start in with his corporate raider routine?" "Your brother believes he's looking out for the company's best interests," Meredith said diplomatically, though something in her eyes suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "His version of best interests always seems to align with whatever gives him more control," Graham observed. He glanced toward the house where Warren could be seen on the terrace, phone pressed to his ear. "Has he mentioned Zenith again?" A shadow crossed Meredith's face. "He has." "Mom," Graham said, lowering his voice, "I've heard rumors. The marketing team gets copied on emails we probably shouldn't see. There's talk that Warren's been meeting with Zenith executives without board approval." Before Meredith could respond, a cheerful voice interrupted them. "Mrs. Hargrove, the children's activity station is all set up." Eleanor Peterson had been Meredith's executive assistant for 25 years, a loyal presence through the company's growth. In her 60s now, with kind eyes behind sensible glasses, she had become more friend than employee. "Thank you, Eleanor," Meredith said warmly, "and thank you for coming in on a Saturday to help." "I wouldn't miss it," Eleanor replied. 30 years is quite the milestone." Warren approached, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Eleanor," he acknowledged with a curt nod, "I need the files from the Westridge acquisition before Monday's meeting." "Of course, Mr. Hargrove," Eleanor replied, her smile becoming fixed. "I'll have them on your desk first thing." "Email them tonight," Warren said with fake sweetness. "I'd like to review them tomorrow." "It's the weekend, Warren," Meredith interjected. "Eleanor is here as a guest, not to work." Warren's smile remained in place, though his eyes hardened. "In a company this size, Mother, there's no such thing as a true day off. Not for those of us committed to its future." He turned back to Eleanor. "Tonight would be appreciated." As Eleanor nodded and moved away, Meredith noticed the slight slump in the older woman's shoulders. Warren had never valued the staff the way she did, never understood that loyalty went both ways. "Was that necessary?" she asked when Eleanor was out of earshot. "Efficiency usually isn't popular," Warren replied coldly, "but it is necessary." Graham cleared his throat. "I should finish setting up the display." The R&D team wanted to showcase the new pediatric formulation. As Graham walked away, Meredith felt a familiar weariness settle over her. The divide between her sons had grown wider over the years, their visions for Hargrove Pharmaceuticals increasingly at odds. Warren saw a potential corporate giant. Graham valued its family roots and mission. And somewhere in between stood Meredith, trying to preserve both the business and the family she loved. By noon, the picnic was in full swing. Children raced across the lawn while their parents chatted in groups under the shade of ancient maple trees. The catering staff kept the buffet tables stocked with summer favorites, and music played from speakers positioned around the grounds. Meredith made her rounds, greeting employees by name, asking after children and spouses. This personal touch had always been her strength, remembering details, making connections. It was something Warren considered inefficient, but she knew better. People worked harder for leaders who saw them as individuals. Mrs. Hargrove, called Dr. Abernathy, head of the research division, I wanted to introduce our newest team member. This is Dr. Sharma, our specialist in autoimmune disorders. Meredith shook hands with the young researcher, engaging her in conversation about her work. As they discussed a promising new treatment protocol, Meredith noticed Warren across the lawn, deep in conversation with two board members. Their serious expressions contrasted sharply with the festive atmosphere. "Excuse me," she said to Dr. Sharma. "Please enjoy the picnic. I'm thrilled to have you on our team." Meredith made her way toward Warren's group, but was intercepted by Eleanor. "Mrs. Hargrove, your daughter's on the phone. Patricia says it's important." Meredith hesitated, torn between addressing whatever Warren was discussing with the board and speaking to her daughter, who rarely called from Seattle. "I'll take it in the garden house," she decided. "It's quieter there." The garden house was a small, elegant structure at the far end of the property, Meredith's personal retreat. Inside, she picked up the waiting call. "Patricia? Is everything all right?" "Mom," came her daughter's voice, tinged with concern. "How are you feeling? Really?" Meredith sank into a chair. "I'm fine, dear. The doctors are pleased with my recovery. Graham says Warren's been pushing his agenda harder since your episode." "Your brother has always been ambitious," Meredith said carefully. "Mom, this isn't about ambition. Olivia heard something when she was interning at Zenith last summer." Meredith straightened. Patricia's daughter Olivia was 26 now, brilliant and observant. What did she hear? That Warren had approached them, not the other way around. That he's been laying groundwork for a takeover for over a year. A chill ran through Meredith despite the warm day. "That's a serious accusation, Patricia." Olivia wouldn't make it lightly. Patricia paused. "Mom, we've been keeping something from you. Olivia didn't just study business at Northwestern. She double majored in biochemistry." "Biochemistry?" Meredith repeated, surprised. "But she never mentioned." "Because we weren't sure how Warren would react. She's been working with Graham remotely, learning the research side of Hargrove. She wants to follow in your footsteps, not Warren's." Meredith felt a complex mix of emotions, pride in her granddaughter, concern about the secrecy, and a growing unease about Warren's plans. "I need to think about this, Patricia. When can you come to Burlington?" "I've already booked a flight for tomorrow. Olivia's finishing her final exams, but she can fly out next week if needed." "Good," Meredith said firmly. "I think it's time for a family meeting, one where all the cards are on the table." After ending the call, Meredith remained seated, processing this new information. The garden house windows framed a perfect view of the picnic, where Warren now stood at the center of a group of board members, gesturing emphatically. Whatever he was selling, they seemed to be buying. She rose slowly, determination replacing her earlier fatigue. If Warren was indeed orchestrating a coup, she needed to be prepared. The company wasn't just her livelihood, it was her legacy, built on Thomas's dreams and her own sweat and tears. As she stepped outside, the summer heat hit her like a wall. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt slightly. She grabbed the doorframe, steadying herself. "Just the heat," she murmured, taking a deep breath. But as she started back toward the main grounds, the dizziness returned, stronger this time. The voices from the picnic seemed suddenly distant, as if coming from underwater. She tried to call out, but her tongue felt heavy. The last thing she saw was Warren, looking up from his conversation, his expression changing from annoyance to alarm as she crumpled to the ground. "Mom!" Graham's voice seemed far away as darkness closed in. Through narrowing vision, she saw Warren pull out his phone, not calling for help, but making a different call entirely. "It's happening," she thought she heard him whisper. "Start the process." Then everything went black. The world came back in fragments, beeping machines, hushed voices, the antiseptic smell of hospital sheets. Meredith blinked against the harsh fluorescent lighting, trying to orient herself. "She's awake," came a voice she didn't recognize. A nurse in blue scrubs appeared in her field of vision, smiling professionally. "Mrs. Hargrove, you're at Burlington Medical Center. You collapsed at your home yesterday." "Yesterday?" Meredith tried to speak, but her throat felt parched. The nurse offered her water through a straw. "Don't try to talk just yet," the nurse advised. "Your son Graham just stepped out to get coffee. He's been here all night." Meredith nodded slightly, grateful. Of course Graham had stayed. She glanced around the private room, noting flowers already arranged on the windowsill. Her gaze fell on a clipboard at the foot of her bed, medical charts with her name prominently displayed. The door opened, and Graham entered, coffee cup in hand. When he saw her awake, relief washed over his face. "Mom," he said, rushing to her bedside. "Thank God. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Meredith managed, her voice raspy. "What happened?" Graham set his coffee down and took her hand. "You collapsed at the picnic. The doctors say it was another thanks in advance, a mini stroke. But they've run tests, and they're optimistic about your recovery." Meredith closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this news. A second episode so soon after the first wasn't good. She could already imagine Warren's reaction, the ammunition this would give him. "Warren?" she asked. A shadow crossed Graham's face. "He was here earlier. He had to leave for a meeting." "A meeting?" While she lay in a hospital bed. Typical Warren. "Patricia called," Graham continued. "She's on her way. Her flight lands in a couple of hours." Meredith nodded, then frowned as a memory surfaced. "Warren was on his phone when I fell." Graham's expression darkened. "I saw that too. He claims he was calling 911, but you don't believe him," Meredith finished. Before Graham could respond, the door opened again. Dr. Winters entered, a tall woman with a brisk manner and prematurely gray hair. Meredith recognized her as one of the hospital's neurologists, though not the one who had treated her after her first episode. "Mrs. Hargrove, good to see you awake," Dr. Winters said, picking up the chart. "I'm Dr. Winters. I've been consulting on your case." "Where's Dr. Levine?" Meredith asked. "He treated me last time." "Dr. Levine is at a conference," Dr. Winters replied, without looking up from the chart. "I'll be overseeing your care for now." Something in her tone made Meredith uneasy. She glanced at Graham, who seemed equally skeptical. "When can I go home?" Meredith asked directly. Dr. Winters finally looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "That's what I wanted to discuss. Given this second episode so close to the first, we're concerned about your living situation. Do you live alone, Mrs. Hargrove?" "I have staff at the estate," Meredith replied firmly, "and my son Graham lives 10 minutes away." Nevertheless, Dr. Winters continued with cold precision. "Two cerebrovascular events in such quick succession suggest we need to be cautious. I'd recommend an extended stay for observation, followed by a period of supervised care." Graham straightened. "My mother has the best private health care available. We can arrange for any necessary supervision at home." Dr. Winters gave him a look that bordered on condescending. "Mr. Hargrove, with all due respect, your mother's condition requires professional monitoring. I've already discussed this with your brother, who agrees." "You discussed my mother's care with Warren without waiting for me?" Graham interrupted, his normally calm demeanor slipping. "Mr. Warren Hargrove indicated he's the primary decision-maker for family matters," Dr. Winters replied with fake sweetness. "He mentioned you handle marketing, is it?" Meredith felt a chill that had nothing to do with her condition. Warren was already positioning himself, using her health as leverage. "Dr. Winters," Meredith said quietly but powerfully, "my medical decisions are my own, not my son's. I'd like to see my complete file, please." The doctor hesitated. "Mrs. Hargrove, in your condition." "My condition doesn't affect my legal rights," Meredith interrupted. The file, please. And I'd like to speak with the hospital administrator about transferring my care back to Dr. Levine upon his return. Dr. Winters's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing annoyance. As you wish. I'll have the nurse bring your file. She left without further comment. When the door closed, Graham let out a low whistle. That was interesting. That was Warren, Meredith corrected. Dr. Winters is on his payroll, or I miss my guess. Graham nodded slowly. He's moving faster than we thought, which means we need to move faster too, Meredith said, struggling to sit up straighter. Graham, I need you to do something for me. In my study at home, behind the painting of Lake Champlain, there's a safe. Graham's eyebrows rose. I didn't know about any safe. That was the point, Meredith said with a hint of a smile. The combination is the 22nd of July, 2063. Your wedding anniversary, Graham realized. Inside, you'll find a red folder marked contingency. Bring it to me and don't tell anyone you have it. Not Eleanor, not the board, and especially not Warren. Graham looked concerned. Mom, what's going on? What's in that folder? Meredith reached for his hand. Insurance. I've suspected for some time that Warren might try something like this. I just didn't think he'd move so quickly. A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse entered with a thick medical file, which she handed to Meredith before checking her vital signs. Your daughter just called the nurse's station, the nurse informed her. She's arrived early and is on her way up. Meredith nodded her thanks. When the nurse left, she turned back to Graham. Go now. Get the folder and come straight back. Don't stop to talk to anyone. Graham hesitated. I don't want to leave you alone. Patricia will be here any minute, Meredith assured him. And I'm not as helpless as Warren thinks. After Graham reluctantly departed, Meredith opened her medical file. As she suspected, Dr. Winters had documented signs of cognitive impairment and decision-making concerns that Dr. Levine had never mentioned. The groundwork for declaring her incompetent was being methodically laid. She was still reviewing the file when the door opened again. Patricia Hargrove Winters stood there, travel-worn but alert. At 47, she had Meredith's determination and Thomas's analytical mind, her dark hair cut in a practical bob that suited her no-nonsense approach to life. Mom, she said, crossing quickly to the bed and embracing Meredith carefully. You scared us. It takes more than a dizzy spell to keep me down, Meredith replied, returning the hug. Patricia pulled back, studying her mother's face. This doesn't look like just a dizzy spell. It wasn't, Meredith admitted. But it's not as bad as Warren would like everyone to believe, either. She tapped the medical file. He's already got a neurologist documenting concerns about my mental capacity. Patricia's expression hardened. That didn't take long. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer, Meredith said. Your call yesterday confirmed what I've suspected. Patricia took a seat beside the bed. Olivia's been digging deeper since we spoke. She found something else. Warren's been meeting with a lawyer who specializes in conservatorships. Meredith felt a surge of anger, quickly controlled. He wants control of my voting shares. And your estate, Patricia added grimly. Olivia thinks he's in financial trouble. She found records of some questionable investments, high-risk ventures that went south last year. This was new information, and troubling. If Warren was desperate for money, he'd be even more dangerous. Where is Olivia now? Meredith asked, finishing her final exams. She flies in tomorrow. Patricia hesitated. Mom, there's something else you should know. Olivia hasn't just been studying biochemistry alongside business. She's been developing a treatment protocol for vascular dementia building on Grandpa Thomas's original research. Meredith stared at her daughter, stunned. Thomas had begun researching vascular dementia treatments before his death, inspired by his own mother's struggle with the condition. It had been the foundation of their little pharmacy. though the work had been shelved after his passing as Meredith focused on keeping the business afloat. She found his old notes in the archive room last summer, Patricia explained. Graham helped her access them. She's been working with Dr. Abernathy remotely, and they've had some promising results. Why keep this from me? Meredith asked, hurt evident in her voice. Patricia sighed. It was my idea, initially. Warren has been so aggressive about selling the research division. If he knew Olivia was continuing Thomas's work that might not be profitable for years, he'd shut it down immediately, Meredith finished, understanding dawning, and use it as further evidence that the family is too sentimental about research that doesn't generate immediate returns. The door opened again, and Graham slipped in, a red folder clutched under his arm. He looked relieved to see Patricia. Did you tell her about Olivia's project? He asked. Patricia nodded. Just now. Graham handed the folder to Meredith. The safe was where you said. I didn't look inside. Meredith took the folder, running her fingers over its smooth surface. This contains everything we need to stop Warren. Legal documents, financial records, and, she paused, information about Warren that I've kept secret for his entire life. Graham and Patricia exchanged confused glances. What kind of information? Patricia asked. Meredith looked up at her children, her expression grave. The kind that would devastate him if revealed publicly. I never wanted to use it. I still don't. But he's left me no choice. She opened the folder and removed a sealed envelope, handing it to Patricia. This contains DNA test results from 30 years ago. Warren isn't Thomas's biological son. The silence that followed was absolute. Graham sank into a chair, while Patricia stared at the envelope in her hands. That's not possible, Graham finally said. Warren looks like Dad. Everyone always said so. He looks like my father, Meredith corrected quietly. The resemblance to Thomas was coincidental enough that no one ever questioned it. Does Warren know? Patricia asked, still holding the envelope as if it might burn her. Meredith shook her head. No one knows except me, and now you two. Who is his father? Graham asked. Meredith's gaze grew distant. Someone from before I met Thomas. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that according to the company charter, Thomas insisted on when we founded Hargrove Pharmaceuticals, only biological Hargrove descendants can inherit controlling interest. Understanding dawned on Patricia's face. So if this came out, Warren would have no legal claim to the company leadership, Meredith confirmed. The charter was Thomas's way of ensuring the company stayed in the family. He never dreamed that it would exclude his own son, Graham finished, looking troubled. Mom, this will destroy Warren. I know, Meredith said, her voice heavy with regret. That's why it's our last resort. First, we try to reason with him, show him we know what he's planning, and offer an alternative. And if he doesn't back down? Patricia asked. Meredith's expression hardened. Then we do what we must to protect the company and my legacy. The hospital room fell silent as the three of them contemplated the weight of this revelation. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room, much like the shadow now hanging over the Hargrove family. The quiet was broken by a sharp knock. The door swung open without waiting for a response, and Warren stood there, briefcase in hand, two men in suits behind him. Mother, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I see the family's all here. Good. That will make this easier. He stepped into the room, followed by the men. This is Mr. Donovan from the board, and Mr. Reeves, my attorney. We have some papers for you to sign. Meredith met his gaze steadily. What kind of papers, Warren? Just a temporary measure, Warren replied with condescending tone. Given your health concerns, the board feels it would be best if you stepped back from day-to-day operations while you recover. I'll act as interim CEO until you're well. His gaze fell on the red folder in Meredith's lap, and something flickered in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or concern. "What's that?" he asked, gesturing to the folder. Meredith closed it deliberately, her movements calm and measured. "Insurance," she said quietly but powerfully, against exactly this kind of situation. For just a moment, uncertainty crossed Warren's face. Then his confident mask returned. "Mother, you're not thinking clearly. Dr. Winters has documented cognitive concerns following your episodes. For your own good, and for the company's stability, you need to sign these papers." Meredith looked at her eldest son, the boy she had protected for decades, the man who now sought to take everything from her. In his ambition, she saw nothing of Thomas, nothing of herself. Just a stranger wearing a familiar face. "No, Warren," she said firmly. "I won't be signing anything, and if you pursue this course of action, I promise you'll regret it." Warren's smile froze, his eyes hardening. "Is that a threat, Mother?" Meredith held his gaze, unflinching. "It's a promise, from a woman who built an empire from nothing. Don't test me, Warren. You won't like the outcome." The tension in the room was palpable, as mother and son stared at each other, decades of unspoken truths hanging between them, neither willing to back down, neither realizing that the battle they were about to wage would leave no one unscathed. And in Meredith's lap, the red folder held the nuclear option, a truth that would change everything. The standoff stretched into uncomfortable silence. Mr. Donovan, the board member, shifted his weight nervously, while Warren's attorney maintained a practiced, neutral expression. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Warren finally suggested, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I think not," Meredith replied calmly. "Whatever you have to say can be said in front of Patricia and Graham. They're Hargroves, too, after all." The emphasis on the family name wasn't lost on Warren. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Very well," he said with cold precision. "The situation is straightforward. You've suffered 2 cerebrovascular events in less than a month, Doctor. Winters has documented concerns about cognitive impairment. The board has a fiduciary duty to ensure stable leadership. The board serves at my discretion," Meredith reminded him. "And I find it interesting that Dr. Winters, who I've never met before today, feels qualified to assess my cognitive state after a single brief examination." "Mr. Donovan cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Hargrove, I assure you, the board's only concern is your health and the company's stability." "Is it?" Patricia interjected, rising from her chair. "Or is the board's concern whatever Warren has told them it should be?" Warren shot his sister a venomous look. "Stay out of this, Patricia. You abandoned the company years ago. You don't get a vote now." "Actually, she does," Graham said quietly. "Mom transferred 10% of her shares to each of us last year. Or didn't she tell you that, Warren?" The news hit Warren like a physical blow. He turned to Meredith, disbelief etched on his features. "You did what?" "Estate planning," Meredith explained with deceptive mildness. "My financial advisor suggested it for tax purposes." It wasn't the whole truth. The share transfer had been strategic, ensuring that if anything happened to her, Warren wouldn't automatically control the company through her voting shares. Warren recovered quickly, his expression hardening. 10% each to Patricia and Graham still leaves you with 80%. And if you're declared incompetent to manage your affairs, those shares would be controlled by your legal guardian. His implication was clear. "That's your plan?" Graham asked, disgust evident in his voice. "Have our mother declared incompetent so you can seize control of her company?" "I'm protecting her legacy," Warren snapped. "While you've been playing with marketing campaigns and Patricia's been building her separate life in Seattle, I've been the one keeping this company competitive." "By secretly meeting with Zenith Pharmaceuticals?" Patricia challenged. "By planning to sell off the research division that Mom built from Dad's original vision?" Warren's eyes narrowed. "How did you—" He stopped himself, then smiled thinly. "Ah, Olivia, I should have known your daughter would be spying for you." "She wasn't spying," Patricia retorted. "She was interning at Zenith when she overheard things she shouldn't have. Things about how you approach them, not the other way around." Warren's attorney placed a warning hand on his client's arm. "Mr. Hargrove, perhaps we should reschedule this discussion." "No," Warren said sharply, shaking off the attorney's hand. "This ends today." He turned back to Meredith. "Mother, you have a choice. Sign the temporary transfer of power voluntarily, or I'll be forced to petition the court for guardianship. Given your medical records, I'll win." "Medical records that your pet neurologist doctored?" Graham challenged. "Dr. Winters is a respected physician," Warren replied with fake sweetness. "Her assessment will carry significant weight." Meredith had remained silent during this exchange, watching her eldest son carefully. Now she spoke, her voice quiet but powerful. "Warren, I'm going to give you one chance. Walk away from this plan now. Come back to the family. We can discuss a proper succession strategy that honors what this company stands for." For just a moment, something flickered in Warren's eyes, perhaps a memory of the mother who had always protected him, always made him feel special. Then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. "The time for discussion is over," he said flatly. "The company needs to evolve beyond your outdated sentimentality. Sign the papers, Mother." Meredith's expression hardened. "No." Warren nodded as if he'd expected this. "Then you leave me no choice." He turned to his attorney. "Mr. Reeves, prepare the guardianship petition. We'll file first thing Monday morning." "Warren?" Meredith said, her voice suddenly heavy with sadness. "If you do this, I'll have no choice but to defend myself with everything at my disposal, including what's in this folder." She placed her hand on the red folder, drawing Warren's attention to it again. "More sentimental family history?" he asked dismissively. "The board won't care about ancient history, Mother." "This isn't company history," Meredith replied steadily. "It's your history." Something in her tone made Warren pause. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his expression. "What are you talking about?" Meredith held his gaze. "Walk away from this plan, Warren, for your own sake as much as mine." The room fell silent as Warren studied his mother's face, searching for a bluff. Finding none, his expression darkened. "Whatever you think you have, it won't matter," he said finally. "The medical evidence is clear. By this time next week, I'll be in control of Hargrove Pharmaceuticals, and your little folder of secrets can gather dust in a drawer somewhere." He gestured to his companions. "We're done here. Mr. Reeves, file the petition first thing Monday." As they turned to leave, Meredith called after him. "Warren." He paused at the door, not turning around. "I've protected you your entire life," she said softly. "Don't make me stop now." Warren's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't respond. A moment later, he was gone, his attorney and Mr. Donovan following in his wake. When the door closed, Patricia let out a long breath. "Well, that went about as well as could be expected." "He's not going to back down," Graham said grimly. "He's too invested in this plan." Meredith nodded slowly. "I know. Which means we need to move quickly." She turned to Patricia. "Call Olivia. Tell her to forget her exams and get on the next flight. We need her here." "What are you thinking, Mom?" Graham asked. Meredith's expression was resolute. "If Warren wants a war, we'll give him one. But we'll fight on our terms, not his." She opened the red folder again, removing several documents. "Graham, I need you to contact Judge Harriman. She's an old friend. She'll meet with us off the record." "What about Warren's guardianship petition?" Patricia asked. "By Monday morning, it won't matter," Meredith replied, "because by then, I won't own controlling interest in Hargrove Pharmaceuticals anymore." Graham and Patricia exchanged startled looks. "You're selling your shares?" Graham asked incredulously. "Not selling," Meredith corrected. transferring to a trust that I established years ago as a contingency. The Hargrove Family Trust will own my shares, with you two and Olivia as trustees. Can you do that while you're in the hospital? Patricia wondered. Judge Harriman can witness it, Meredith explained. The trust documents are already prepared, they just need to be executed. Graham looked impressed. You really did plan for everything. And when you've built something from nothing, you learn to protect it, Meredith said simply. But there's more we need to do. Patricia, in that same safe at home, there's a blue folder labeled Zenith. I need that too. Patricia nodded. I'll get it after I call Olivia. What's in the Zenith folder? Graham asked. Evidence, Meredith replied. Warren's not the only one who's been gathering information. I've had my suspicions about his dealings with Zenith for months. Eleanor has been helping me document everything. Eleanor? Graham repeated, surprised. Your assistant? A small smile touched Meredith's lips. Eleanor has been with me for 25 years. She sees everything, hears everything, and Warren has always underestimated her. She's been my eyes and ears while he thought she was just a glorified secretary. Remind me never to get on Eleanor's bad side, Patricia murmured. There's one more thing, Meredith continued, her expression growing serious again. We need to contact Dr. Levine. The real reason he's not here is that Warren arranged to have him sent to that conference. I need him back to counter Dr. Winters's assessment. Graham pulled out his phone. I'll call him now. As Graham stepped into the hallway to make the call, Patricia studied her mother's face. You're really prepared to reveal Warren's parentage if it comes to that. Meredith's eyes filled with sadness. It would be my last resort. I've protected that secret for over 50 years. First to spare Thomas, then to protect Warren himself. But if he forces my hand, it would devastate him, Patricia said quietly. Yes, Meredith acknowledged, but he's leaving me no choice. He's threatening everything I've built, everything your father believed in. Patricia hesitated, then asked the question that had been hovering unspoken. Who is Warren's biological father? Meredith was silent for a long moment. His name was Richard Caldwell. He was brilliant, charismatic, and utterly untrustworthy. We had a brief relationship before I met your father. When I discovered I was pregnant, Richard had already moved on to someone else. Does he know about Warren? No, Meredith said firmly. And he never will. He died 15 years ago without ever knowing he had a son. Patricia absorbed this in silence. Finally, she asked, Did Dad know? Meredith nodded slowly. I told Thomas everything before we married. He said it didn't matter that he would love my child as his own. And he did. He never treated Warren differently than you or Graham. But he still put that clause in the company charter, Patricia noted, about only biological Hargroves inheriting control. That was my idea, not his, Meredith admitted. I wanted to ensure the company would always stay in Thomas's bloodline. The irony is, I never imagined it would one day exclude Warren. The door opened, and Graham returned, his expression triumphant. Dr. Levine is cutting his conference short. He'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Good, Meredith said. Now we need to... She was interrupted by a knock at the door. A nurse entered, looking apologetic. I'm sorry, but visiting hours ended 15 minutes ago. Hospital policy only allows one overnight visitor in this unit. Graham and Patricia exchanged glances. I'll stay, Patricia offered. You go get the Zenith folder and contact Judge Harriman. Graham nodded, then leaned down to kiss Meredith's cheek. Try to rest, Mom. We'll handle everything. After Graham left, Patricia settled into the chair beside the bed. You should sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day. Meredith nodded, suddenly feeling every one of her 72 years. The confrontation with Warren had drained her more than she wanted to admit. Patricia, she said as she adjusted her pillow, There's something else you should know. Something not in any folder. Patricia leaned closer. What is it? Warren's been embezzling from the company, Meredith said quietly. Small amounts, carefully hidden in the research budget. I've been tracking it for months. Patricia's eyes widened. Are you sure? Positive. Eleanor found the discrepancies during a routine audit. We kept it quiet while we gathered evidence. Why would he risk it? He makes a fortune as COO. Meredith sighed. I believe he's in financial trouble. Bad investments, possibly gambling debts. The amounts have been increasing recently. That would explain his desperation to take control, Patricia realized. If he becomes CEO, he could cover his tracks completely. Exactly, Meredith confirmed. Which is why we can't let that happen, not just for the company's sake, but for Warren's too. If this came out publicly, he'd face criminal charges. Patricia shook her head in disbelief. Even knowing all this, you're still trying to protect him. He's still my son, Meredith said simply, no matter what he's done. As Meredith drifted toward sleep, her mind filled with memories. Warren as a toddler, taking his first steps toward her outstretched arms. Warren at his college graduation, proud and full of promise. Warren at Thomas's funeral, standing strong beside her as they faced an uncertain future together. Where had that son gone? When had ambition corrupted the boy she'd raised? And was it too late to save him from himself? These questions followed her into uneasy dreams, where she searched endless hospital corridors for a son who was always just around the next corner, always just out of reach. Morning arrived with the clatter of breakfast trays and the shift change of hospital staff. Meredith awoke feeling more clear-headed than she had in days. Patricia was already up, speaking quietly on her phone by the window. She just landed, Patricia reported, ending her call. Olivia will be here in about an hour. Meredith nodded, pushing herself to a more upright position. Any word from Graham? He got the Zenith folder and spoke with Judge Harriman. She's coming here at 11. Patricia hesitated. And Warren's been busy too. Graham overheard him on the phone with the board members, calling an emergency session for Monday morning. Then we have today and tomorrow to prepare our counterattack, Meredith said decisively. Help me up. I need to shower and change before Judge Harriman arrives. Patricia looked concerned. Are you sure you're strong enough? I've never been one to conduct business in a hospital gown, Meredith replied with a hint of her old spirit. Eleanor is bringing me proper clothes. I may be in a hospital, but I'll face this fight on my feet, not lying down. An hour later, freshly showered and dressed in a simple but elegant pantsuit that Eleanor had delivered, Meredith sat in a chair by the window. The hospital had reluctantly agreed to remove her IV temporarily, though a nurse checked her vitals regularly. When Olivia arrived, Meredith hardly recognized her granddaughter. Gone was the carefree college student she'd seen at Christmas. In her place stood a poised young woman with determined eyes that reminded Meredith startlingly of Thomas. Grandma, Olivia said, embracing her carefully. You look better than I expected. And you look like a pharmaceutical executive already, Meredith observed with approval. Olivia smiled, a flash of her old self showing through. Mom said it was war, so I dressed for battle. Smart girl, Meredith approved. Now, before Judge Harriman arrives, tell me about this research you've been doing. Your grandfather's vascular dementia project? Olivia's eyes lit up with genuine passion. It's incredible, Grandma. Grandpa Thomas was decades ahead of his time. His approach to targeting the blood-brain barrier was revolutionary. Dr. Abernathy and I have built on his foundation, and the preliminary results are promising. How promising? Meredith asked. Phase 1 trials promising, Olivia replied without hesitation. We've developed a compound that shows significant neuroprotective effects in animal models. Dr. Abernathy believes we could be ready for human trials within 18 months. Meredith felt a surge of pride, followed by renewed determination. This was exactly the kind of research Warren would abandon in his pursuit of quick profits, the kind of work that had always been at the heart of Hargrove Pharmaceuticals' mission. "Does Warren know about this?" she asked. Olivia shook her head. "We've kept it compartmentalized within Dr. Abernathy's team. The project is listed in the research budget under a generic neurological study designation." "Good," Meredith said. "That gives us another card to play." A knock at the door announced Eleanor's arrival. The assistant entered carrying a leather portfolio and a small overnight bag. "Mrs. Hargrove," she greeted Meredith warmly. "You look much better today." "Thank you, Eleanor," Meredith replied. "And thank you for everything you've been doing behind the scenes." Eleanor's expression turned serious. "Mr. Warren was at the office this morning. He had the IT department change all the security protocols, including your access codes." "Already consolidating power," Patricia observed grimly. "There's more," Eleanor continued. "He's called a special board meeting for Monday at 9 a.m. The agenda includes a vote on temporary leadership transition due to health concerns." "He's not wasting any time," Graham said from the doorway, having arrived in time to hear Eleanor's report. He carried the blue Zenith folder Meredith had requested. "Neither will we," Meredith said firmly. She turned to Eleanor. "Did you bring the documents I asked for?" Eleanor nodded, opening her portfolio and removing a thick file. "Everything's here, the trust documents, the financial records, showing the discrepancies in Warren's departments, and the correspondence with Zenith Pharmaceuticals." "Excellent," Meredith said. "Judge Harriman should be here soon. Once the trust transfer is complete, Warren's guardianship petition becomes irrelevant. I won't control the company shares anymore." "He'll fight it," Graham warned. "He'll claim you weren't of sound mind when you made the transfer." "That's why we need Dr. Levine back," Meredith acknowledged. "His medical assessment will counter Dr. Winters." "There's something else we should consider," Olivia spoke up, her expression thoughtful. "Uncle Warren's entire strategy hinges on portraying Grandma as mentally unfit. What if we turn that narrative around?" "What do you mean?" Patricia asked. "I mean, what if we go public with Grandma's medical records, the real ones, not Dr. Winter's version? Show that she's being targeted in a hostile takeover attempt by her own son? The press would have a field day." "That's risky," Graham cautioned. "It could damage the company's reputation, affect stock prices." "It could also rally support," Olivia countered. "Hargrove Pharmaceuticals has always had a strong public image as a family company with ethical values. If people knew Warren was trying to seize control to sell off the research division." Meredith considered this. "It's a nuclear option, but not as devastating as revealing Warren's parentage. Let's keep it in reserve." Another knock announced Judge Harriman's arrival. The judge was a formidable woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Meredith," she greeted, taking in the hospital room and its occupants with a quick glance. "You've gotten yourself into quite a situation." "Nothing I can't handle with the right help," Meredith replied. "Thank you for coming, Helen." Judge Harriman set her briefcase on the bed. "I've reviewed the trust documents you sent over. Everything appears to be in order. But I want to be clear. I'm here as a friend, not in my official capacity. For this to be legally binding, you need to be of sound mind." "I am," Meredith assured her. "And Dr. Levine will confirm that when he returns tomorrow." "Good," the judge said briskly. "Because once these papers are signed, there's no going back. Your shares will be irrevocably transferred to the trust." "I understand," Meredith said firmly, "and I'm ready." As Judge Harriman prepared the documents, Meredith felt a strange sense of both loss and liberation. For 30 years, Hargrove Pharmaceuticals had been her life's work, her identity, transferring control even to a trust managed by her children and granddaughter felt like the end of an era. But it was also a beginning, a new chapter for the company, led by the next generation of Hargroves. If only Warren could have been part of that future, instead of forcing this confrontation. "Before we proceed," Judge Harriman said, I need to ask, are you doing this of your own free will, without coercion? I am, Meredith confirmed. And you understand that this transfer is permanent? You will no longer have controlling interest in Hargrove Pharmaceuticals? I understand, Meredith said, but the company will remain in the family, guided by the principles Thomas and I established. Judge Harriman nodded, satisfied. Then let's begin. As Meredith signed page after page, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Warren could file all the guardianship petitions he wanted. They would be meaningless once these documents were executed. It's done, Judge Harriman announced finally, affixing her seal to the last page. The Hargrove Family Trust now controls 80% of Hargrove Pharmaceuticals, with Patricia, Graham, and Olivia as trustees. Meredith sat back, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. Thank you, Helen. Don't thank me yet, the judge cautioned. This is legally sound, but Warren won't give up easily. Be prepared for a fight. We are, Meredith assured her, and we have one more card to play if necessary. After Judge Harriman departed, the room fell silent as the family absorbed the magnitude of what they'd just done. So what happens now? Graham asked finally. Now, Meredith said with quiet determination, we prepare for Monday's board meeting. Warren thinks he's walking into a coronation. Instead, he'll find himself facing a reckoning. The rest of Saturday passed in a flurry of activity. From her hospital room, Meredith orchestrated their counteroffensive with the precision that had built Hargrove Pharmaceuticals from the ground up. Graham contacted key board members who had always been loyal to Meredith, carefully feeling out where their allegiances might lie without revealing their full strategy. Patricia and Olivia pored over the financial records Eleanor had compiled, documenting every suspicious transaction in Warren's departments. By evening, Dr. Levine had returned from his conference and come straight to the hospital. After a thorough examination, he looked at Meredith with a reassuring smile. Physically, you're recovering well from the thanks in advance, he reported. And cognitively, you're as sharp as ever. I see absolutely no evidence of the impairment Dr. Winters documented. Will you put that in writing? Meredith asked. Already done, Dr. Levine replied, handing her a sealed envelope. My complete neurological assessment, with copies sent to the hospital administration and your personal medical file. I've also requested an ethics review of Dr. Winters' involvement in your case. Thank you, James, Meredith said gratefully. I knew I could count on you. After the doctor left, Meredith turned to her family. We should all get some rest. Tomorrow we'll finalize our strategy for Monday's board meeting. I'll stay with you tonight, Graham offered. Meredith shook her head. No need, Eleanor has volunteered. The rest of you go home and sleep in real beds. We'll reconvene in the morning. Though they protested, Meredith insisted. Once they had reluctantly departed, Eleanor settled into the visitor's chair with a book. You should rest too, Eleanor, Meredith said. You've been working nonstop. Eleanor smiled. I'll rest when Warren's been stopped. I've watched him undermine you for years, Mrs. Hargrove. It's about time someone stood up to him. Meredith studied her loyal assistant thoughtfully. You've never liked him, have you? I've respected him professionally, Eleanor replied diplomatically. But no, I've never liked how he treats people he considers beneath him. Meredith nodded slowly. Thomas always said you could judge a person's character by how they treat those they don't need to impress. Mr. Thomas was a wise man, Eleanor agreed. Warren never understood that the administrative staff sees everything. We know who stays late to help a colleague finish a project and who takes credit for other people's work. We know who remembers birthdays and who can't be bothered to learn names. And Warren failed those tests, Meredith surmised. Spectacularly, Eleanor confirmed. That's why it was so easy to gather information on his activities. People were eager to help once they knew I was working for you. Meredith felt a pang of sadness. How had she raised a son who inspired such disloyalty? Where had she gone wrong? As if reading her thoughts, Eleanor added gently, It's not your fault, Mrs. Hargrove. Some people just choose their own path, regardless of how they were raised. Meredith smiled gratefully. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. As night settled over the hospital, Meredith found sleep elusive. Her mind kept returning to Warren, not the ruthless businessman plotting against her, but the little boy who had once followed her around the house, wanting to be just like his mother. The teenager who had proudly announced he would run Hargrove Pharmaceutical someday. The young man who had stood beside her at Thomas's funeral, promising to help her keep the company strong. When had ambition corrupted that promise? When had keeping the company strong transformed into taking the company for himself? And the question that haunted her most, if Warren knew the truth about his parentage, would it have changed anything? Sunday morning brought unexpected news. Graham arrived early, his expression troubled. Warren's moved up the board meeting, he announced without preamble. It's now scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow, and he's changed the location to the Zenith Pharmaceuticals Conference Center. That's not possible, Meredith said, sitting up straighter. Board meetings can only be rescheduled with the chair's approval, and I'm still chair. He's claiming emergency powers as COO due to your incapacitation, Graham explained. And he stacked the deck, invited Zenith executives to attend as interested potential partners. Meredith's eyes narrowed. He's planning to announce the sale of the research division at the same meeting where he takes control. It gets worse, Graham continued. I've heard from Dr. Abernathy. Warren ordered a complete audit of the research division this morning. If he discovers Olivia's project, he'll shut it down immediately, Meredith finished. We need to move faster than we planned. She reached for the phone. Call Patricia and Olivia. Tell them to meet us at the company headquarters at noon. And contact our board allies. We need them fully briefed before tomorrow. What about you? Graham asked. You're still officially a patient. Meredith's expression hardened. Not anymore. Call Dr. Levine and tell him I need discharge papers immediately. I'm not facing Warren from a hospital bed. Despite the doctor's reservations, Meredith was discharged by 11 a.m. As Eleanor drove her to the Hargrove Pharmaceuticals headquarters, Meredith felt a surge of determination. This was her company, built with her own hands after Thomas died. She wouldn't surrender it without a fight, especially not to a son who had forgotten everything she'd taught him about business ethics and family loyalty. The Sunday security staff looked startled as Meredith strode through the lobby, Graham, Patricia, and Olivia flanking her like an honor guard. Mrs. Hargrove, the security guard stammered. We weren't expecting you. Mr. Warren said you were in the hospital. As you can see, I'm not, Meredith replied calmly. My office, please. I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Warren left strict instructions. No one is allowed on the executive floor today while they conduct the audit. Meredith fixed him with a steady gaze. Young man, whose name is on the building. The guard swallowed. Hargrove, ma'am. And who am I? Mrs. Hargrove. Then I suggest you call Mr. Warren and inform him that I'm going to my office. If he has a problem with that, he can discuss it with me directly. The guard hesitated, then nodded, reaching for his phone. As he made the call, Meredith led her family to the elevators. That was impressive, Grandma, Olivia whispered. Meredith smiled slightly. One of the advantages of being the founder, people still remember who built this place. When they reached the executive floor, they found it buzzing with unusual Sunday activity. Staff from Zenith Pharmaceuticals moved between offices, examining files and taking notes. In the main conference room, Warren stood with several men in suits, gesturing at a presentation displayed on the large screen. He looked up as Meredith entered, shock momentarily displacing his professional mask. Mother, he said, recovering quickly. You should be in the hospital. Clearly, I'm not, Meredith replied evenly. What I am is curious about why Zenith executives have access to our confidential files before any deal has been approved by the board. The Zenith representatives looked uncomfortable. Warren forced a smile. Just preliminary discussions, he said smoothly. The board will have final approval, of course. Of course, Meredith echoed. Though it seems presumptuous to begin integration planning before that approval. One of the Zenith executives stepped forward. Mrs. Hargrove, I'm David Mercer, CEO of Zenith. Your son assured us that the board was supportive of this acquisition in principle, pending only final terms. Did he? Meredith asked, her gaze never leaving Warren's face. How interesting, considering the board hasn't formally discussed any acquisition offer. Mercer frowned, turning to Warren. You said your mother had stepped back from operations due to health concerns. She has, Warren insisted, his voice hardening. Mother, you're confused. We discussed the Zenith offer last week. The board has been briefed. Gaslighting doesn't become you, Warren. Meredith said quietly but powerfully. Mr. Mercer, I apologize for the confusion, but there is no approved deal with Zenith. I suggest you and your team leave until proper negotiations can be conducted. Mercer looked between mother and son, clearly sensing the tension. Perhaps we should continue this tomorrow at the board meeting. Warren, we'll see you at 8 a.m. After the Zenith team departed, an uncomfortable silence fell over the conference room. Warren's expression had turned thunderous. You had no right to interfere, he said, his voice cold. That deal has been months in the making. Without board approval, Meredith countered. Without my approval. Your approval won't matter after tomorrow's meeting, Warren said with condescending tone. The board will vote to appoint me interim CEO while you recover from your health issues. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Meredith replied calmly. As of yesterday, I no longer control the voting shares of Hargrove Pharmaceuticals. Warren stared at her, confusion replacing anger. What are you talking about? My shares have been transferred to the Hargrove Family Trust, Meredith explained. Patricia, Graham, and Olivia are the trustees. The blood drained from Warren's face as he processed this information. You can't do that. You're not mentally competent to make such decisions. Dr. Levine's assessment says otherwise, Graham interjected, holding up the sealed medical report. Unlike Dr. Winters, he's been Mom's physician for years, not a convenient new consultant. Warren's gaze darted between them, calculation evident in his expression. It doesn't matter. The transfer won't hold up in court, and I still have my own shares, plus proxy agreements with several board members. 15%, Patricia noted, against our combined 90%. And about those proxy agreements, Olivia added, opening her laptop. We've been reviewing the company bylaws. Proxy voting is only valid if disclosed to the board secretary 72 hours before the meeting. You filed yours yesterday only 48 hours before your rescheduled meeting. Warren's jaw clenched. This is absurd. You can't just change the rules because you don't like the outcome. We're not changing anything, Meredith said firmly. We're enforcing the rules you chose to ignore. Warren's composure finally cracked. This company needs to evolve, he shouted. Your sentimental attachment to Thomas's outdated vision is holding us back. The research division is a money pit. Zenith is offering us a way forward. Forward into what? Meredith challenged. A future where profit matters more than patience? Where we abandon research that might not pay off for years but could save countless lives? Business isn't charity, Warren snapped. It's about growth and return on investment. Is that why you've been embezzling from the research budget? Meredith asked quietly. For your personal return on investment? Warren froze. What did you say? Meredith nodded to Eleanor, who opened her portfolio and removed a thick file. Financial records showing systematic discrepancies in the research division's budget. Funds diverted to shell companies that trace back to your personal accounts. That's a lie, Warren hissed. But his eyes betrayed his panic. It's all documented, Eleanor replied steadily. Every transaction, every shell company, every offshore account. Warren turned on her, his expression venomous. You? My mother's secretary has been spying on me? Executive assistant, Eleanor corrected with dignity. And I wasn't spying. I was doing my job protecting Hargrove Pharmaceuticals from threats, including internal ones. Warren laughed bitterly. So this is your plan? Threaten me with baseless accusations of financial impropriety? Not baseless, Graham said. And not our only evidence. Meredith stepped forward, her expression softening slightly. Warren, it doesn't have to be this way. Return the money, step back from this Zenith deal, and we can work together on a proper succession plan. A plan that excludes me, no doubt, Warren said bitterly. With Golden Boy Graham and his niece taking over, while I'm pushed aside. That's not true, Meredith insisted. There's a place for you in the company's future, just not as the sole leader, not with your current priorities. Warren's laugh was harsh. Always the diplomat, Mother. Always finding the gentlest way to say I'm not good enough. The raw pain in his voice caught Meredith off guard. Was that truly how he felt? Had she somehow made her eldest son believe he wasn't valued? Warren, she began, her tone gentler. This isn't about save it, he interrupted. I don't need your pity or your platitudes. Tomorrow's board meeting will proceed as scheduled. We'll see who has the stronger case. He gathered his papers with sharp, angry movements. And if you think financial allegations will stop me, you're mistaken. The board cares about results, not accounting discrepancies that can be explained away as administrative errors. As he strode toward the door, Meredith called after him. Warren, there's something else you should know before tomorrow. He paused, but didn't turn around. Something I've kept from you your entire life, Meredith continued, her voice heavy with regret. Something that will become public if you force this confrontation. Slowly, Warren turned to face her. More threats, Mother? What dark secret do you think could possibly matter now? Meredith met his gaze steadily. The truth about your father. Warren's expression flickered between confusion and dismissal. What about him? Thomas has been dead for 30 years. Thomas wasn't your biological father, Meredith said quietly. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Warren stared at her, disbelief etched on his features. That's a lie, he whispered. It's the truth, Meredith replied sadly. I was pregnant when I met Thomas. He knew, and he chose to raise you as his own. We never intended for you to find out. Warren shook his head, backing away as if from a physical threat. No, you're making this up to manipulate me, to turn the board against me. I have DNA tests, Meredith said, from 30 years ago, and new ones conducted last month, when I realized this confrontation might be inevitable. Why? Warren demanded, his voice raw with emotion. Why tell me this now? Because according to the company charter, only biological Hargrove descendants can inherit controlling interest, Patricia explained gently. If this becomes public, your legal claim to leadership would be invalidated. Warren's face contorted with rage and pain. So that's your nuclear option? Destroy me personally to win a corporate battle? It doesn't have to come to that, Meredith pleaded. Warren, please, step back from this fight. We can find another way forward together, as a family. For a moment, just a moment, something vulnerable flickered in Warren's eyes. Then his expression hardened into a mask of cold fury. Family? He spat. You've just told me I'm not even part of this family, that my entire life has been a lie. That's not true, Graham interjected. You're still our brother. This doesn't change that. Warren ignored him, his gaze fixed on Meredith. All these years, I thought I was working to preserve Thomas Hargrove's legacy. Turns out I was fighting for a stranger's company. Thomas loved you, Meredith insisted. He was your father in every way that mattered. Except biologically, Warren said bitterly. And apparently, that's the only thing that counts when it comes to this company. He straightened, visibly pulling himself together. Release whatever information you want, Mother. Destroy my reputation if you must. But know this, I will fight you with everything I have. And when this is over, whatever remains of this family will be beyond repair. With that, he strode from the room, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Patricia was the first to speak. That could have gone better. It could have gone worse, Graham countered. At least he knows what he's facing now. Meredith sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I never wanted it to come to this. I never wanted him to know. Olivia approached, placing a gentle hand on her grandmother's shoulder. Do you think he'll back down? Meredith shook her head slowly. No. Warren has never backed down from anything in his life. He'll come to that board meeting tomorrow prepared for war. Then so will we, Graham said firmly. Meredith looked up at her family, Patricia's steady determination, Graham's quiet strength, Olivia's brilliant promise. 3 generations of true Hargroves, united to protect what Thomas had begun and she had built. Yes, she agreed, her resolve returning. So will we. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. A beautiful Vermont summer day that belied the storm gathering in the Zenith Pharmaceuticals Conference Center. Meredith arrived early with her family, determined to be present when the board members arrived. Warren had chosen the location strategically neutral territory where he would have the psychological advantage. But Meredith had spent decades outmaneuvering corporate rivals. Her son, for all his cunning, was still learning from her playbook. As board members filtered in, many looked surprised to see Meredith present and clearly in command of her faculties. She greeted each by name, inquiring after spouses and children, demonstrating her trademark personal touch and sharp memory. Warren arrived last, flanked by his attorney and Dr. Winters. He faltered momentarily upon seeing Meredith holding court at the head of the table, then recovered, taking a seat at the opposite end. Good morning, he greeted the room with professional detachment. Thank you all for accommodating the schedule change. A change made without proper authorization, Meredith noted calmly. But we're all here now, so let's proceed. Warren's jaw tightened, but he nodded to his attorney, who distributed folders to each board member. Before we begin, the attorney announced, Mr. Hargrove has asked me to present a petition regarding Mrs. Meredith Hargrove's capacity to continue as CEO and board chair. That won't be necessary, Meredith interrupted. As of Saturday, I have transferred my controlling interest in Hargrove Pharmaceuticals to the Hargrove Family Trust. I am voluntarily stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room. Warren's expression flickered between triumph and suspicion. The board will need to approve an interim CEO, he said carefully. The trust has already made its recommendation, Meredith replied. The trustees propose a co-CEO arrangement between Graham Hargrove and Olivia Hargrove Winters, with myself remaining as board chair during the transition. Warren's triumph vanished. That's absurd. Graham has no experience running a pharmaceutical company, and Olivia is barely out of college. Actually, Olivia spoke up, I hold dual degrees in biochemistry and business administration, with a focus on pharmaceutical management, and I've been working directly with the research division for the past year. As for experience, Graham added, I've been with Hargrove Pharmaceuticals for 20 years. I may have focused on marketing, but I understand every aspect of this company's operations. Warren turned to the board members. This is clearly a desperate attempt to maintain family control without regard for shareholder value. The Zenith offer represents a premium of 30% over our current stock price. For the research division only, Meredith clarified. The division that, according to Warren's reports, has been underperforming for years. She nodded to Olivia, who stood and moved to the presentation screen. Board members, I'd like to share something that's been developed in the research division, a project that Warren's financial reports have deliberately obscured. As Olivia launched into a presentation on the vascular dementia treatment protocol, complete with promising trial data and market projections, Warren's expression darkened. This was clearly information he hadn't known existed. This treatment, Olivia concluded, builds on Thomas Hargrove's original research. It represents not just a potential blockbuster therapy, but the fulfillment of our company's founding mission, developing treatments that change lives, not just generate profits. The board members looked impressed. Even some of Warren's allies were nodding thoughtfully. Warren leaned forward. A single promising compound doesn't justify maintaining an entire unprofitable division. The Zenith offer would kill this project immediately, Graham interrupted. Zenith's business model focuses on acquiring existing treatments, not developing new ones. Their R&D budget is 1/3 of ours as a percentage of revenue. Furthermore, Patricia added, the Zenith offer significantly undervalues the research division's assets. Our independent valuation shows it's worth at least 50% more than they're offering. Warren's frustration was becoming visible. This is all speculation and sentiment. The hard numbers show that selling the research division is the fiscally responsible choice. Speaking of hard numbers, Meredith said quietly, perhaps we should discuss the financial discrepancies in the research division's budget over the past 3 years. She nodded to Eleanor, who distributed another set of folders to the board members. These documents show systematic diversion of research funds to shell companies, Meredith explained. Shell companies that trace back to personal accounts controlled by Warren Hargrove. The room fell silent as board members flipped through the damning evidence. Warren's face had gone pale. These are administrative errors, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Accounting mistakes that can be easily explained. By all means, explain them, Meredith invited. Explain why research funds were routed through 3 separate shell companies before landing in an offshore account under your control. Warren looked around the table, finding no allies in the shocked faces of the board members. Even his most loyal supporters appeared disturbed by the evidence before them. This is character assassination, he said desperately. A smear campaign to discredit me because I dared to challenge my mother's outdated vision for this company. No, Warren, Meredith said sadly. This is the consequence of your own actions. Actions that betray everything this company stands for, everything your father stood for. He wasn't my father, Warren shouted, losing control at last. You made that perfectly clear yesterday. I'm not even a real Hargrove. A stunned silence fell over the room. Board members exchanged confused glances, while the Zenith executives at the back of the room leaned forward with sudden interest. Meredith closed her eyes briefly, pained that Warren had revealed this himself. When she opened them, her gaze was steady. Thomas Hargrove raised you as his son, she said firmly. He loved you without reservation or condition. That makes you a Hargrove in every way that matters. Except legally, Warren said bitterly. Isn't that why you're revealing this now? To ensure I can't challenge your precious trust arrangement? I revealed it to you privately, Meredith corrected. You chose to announce it to the board. Warren looked around the table, seeing his position crumbling before his eyes. The financial evidence alone would end his career at Hargrove Pharmaceuticals. The revelation about his parentage had destroyed whatever sympathy he might have retained. This meeting is over, he said abruptly, gathering his papers. My attorney will be in touch regarding these slanderous accusations. As he stood to leave, Meredith called after him. Warren, please don't leave like this. We can still find a way forward. He paused at the door, not turning around. It's too late for that, Mother. You've made your choice. After he left, the board meeting continued in a subdued atmosphere. The vote to approve Graham and Olivia as co-CEOs passed unanimously. The Zenith offer was formally rejected. A special committee was formed to investigate the financial discrepancies and determine appropriate action. When it was over, Meredith felt hollow despite their victory. They had saved the company, preserved Thomas's legacy, and secured a future for Hargrove Pharmaceuticals that aligned with its founding principles. But they had lost Warren, perhaps forever. As the board members filed out, Patricia approached her mother. "You did what you had to do, Mom. Warren gave you no choice." "There's always a choice," Meredith replied quietly. "I just hope I made the right one." Graham joined them, his expression troubled. "Should someone go after him? Make sure he's okay?" Meredith shook her head. "He needs time, space to process everything that's happened." "Will he ever forgive us?" Olivia asked softly. Meredith looked toward the door where her eldest son had made his exit. "I don't know, but this family has survived challenges before. We'll survive this one too." As they gathered their things to leave, Meredith paused to look out the window at the Hargrove Pharmaceuticals campus, visible in the distance. 30 years of work, of sacrifice, of building something that mattered. Thomas would be proud of what she'd accomplished and heartbroken by the cost. "Come," she said to her family. "We have a company to run, and a son and brother to try to bring home." Whether Warren would ever return to the fold remained to be seen. But Meredith Hargrove had built an empire from nothing after losing her husband. She wouldn't give up on her son without a fight. Some legacies were measured in dollars and stock prices, others in lives touched and changed. But the most important legacy of all was family, even when that family was fractured and in need of healing. As Meredith walked out with Graham, Patricia, and Olivia beside her, she felt both the weight of what they'd lost and the hope of what might still be saved. The battle for Hargrove Pharmaceuticals was over. The battle for Warren's heart and soul was just beginning. The first snow of winter dusted the grounds of the Hargrove estate, transforming the landscape into a pristine white canvas. From her study window, Meredith watched the flakes drift lazily downward, coating the bare branches of the maple trees that had witnessed 3 decades of family history. So much had changed in 6 months. Graham and Olivia had settled into their roles as co-CEOs with remarkable synergy, his marketing brilliance complementing her scientific vision. The vascular dementia treatment had advanced to early human trials, attracting positive attention from medical journals and investors alike. Hargrove Pharmaceuticals stock had risen steadily, vindicating Meredith's faith in the research division's value. The board had handled Warren's financial improprieties with surprising discretion. Rather than press criminal charges, they had accepted his resignation and a repayment plan for the embezzled funds. The official story that Warren had left to pursue other opportunities preserved what remained of his professional reputation. But the personal wounds remained unhealed. Warren had moved to Chicago, cutting off contact with the entire family. His Hargrove shares had been sold back to the company in a transaction handled entirely through attorneys. The last Meredith had heard, he was working as a consultant for a healthcare investment firm, using his pharmaceutical knowledge to help investors identify acquisition targets. The irony wasn't lost on her. A knock at the study door interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor entered, carrying a silver tray with tea. "You've been staring out that window for an hour," her assistant observed, setting the tray on the desk. "The doctor said you should avoid stress." Meredith smiled faintly. "I'm not stressed, Eleanor. Just reflective." "Thinking about Warren?" Eleanor asked perceptively. Meredith nodded, accepting the cup of tea Eleanor offered. "It's been 6 months without a word, not even at Thanksgiving. He needs time," Eleanor said gently. "Some wounds can't be rushed to heal." "I know," Meredith sighed, "but I'm 72 years old. Time isn't a luxury I can count on." Eleanor's expression softened. "You're in excellent health, Mrs. Hargrove. Dr. Levine said your last checkup was perfect." "Even so," Meredith replied, "I don't want to leave this world with my family fractured." The intercom buzzed before Eleanor could respond. "Mrs. Hargrove," came the security guard's voice, "there's someone at the gate. He says he's expected, but he's not on the approved visitor list." Meredith frowned. "Who is it?" A pause then. He says his name is Warren Hargrove. Meredith's teacup froze halfway to her lips. She exchanged a startled glance with Eleanor. "Send him up," she said, her voice steady despite the sudden racing of her heart. Eleanor moved toward the door. "I'll leave you two alone." "No," Meredith said quickly. "Stay, please. At least until we see why he's here." The minutes that followed seemed interminable. Meredith straightened papers on her desk, adjusted her sweater, tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear, small, nervous gestures that betrayed her anxiety. When the knock finally came, it was softer than Warren's usual confident rap. Meredith took a deep breath. "Come in," she called. The door opened, and Warren stood on the threshold. 6 months had changed him. He looked thinner, the sharp edges of his face more pronounced. His hair had more gray than she remembered, and his normally impeccable attire was replaced by a simple sweater and slacks. But it was the uncertainty in his eyes, so unlike his usual confidence, that struck her most forcefully. "Mother," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Warren," she replied, rising from her chair. "This is unexpected." He remained in the doorway, as if unsure of his welcome. "I can leave if this isn't a good time." "No," Meredith said quickly. "Please, come in." Eleanor moved toward the door. "I'll bring another cup." As she slipped out, Warren stepped into the study, his gaze taking in the familiar surroundings. Nothing had changed since he'd last been here. The same cherry wood desk, the same family photos on the walls, the same view of the snow-covered grounds. "You're looking well," he said awkwardly. "So are you," Meredith replied, though it wasn't entirely true. He looked tired, worn in a way that went beyond physical appearance. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. 30 years of shared history, and suddenly neither knew what to say. "I heard about the vascular dementia treatment," Warren finally offered. "Phase 1 trials showing promising results." Meredith nodded. "Olivia's work. She's brilliant. Reminds me of Thomas." Warren flinched slightly at the name, and Meredith immediately regretted the comparison. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," Warren interrupted. "He was my father in every way that mattered. You were right about that." Another silence, less strained this time. "Why are you here, Warren?" Meredith finally asked. He moved to the window, looking out at the falling snow. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past 6 months, about choices, about legacy, about what really matters." He turned to face her. "I was wrong, Mother, about a lot of things. The company, the research division, my methods." Meredith studied him carefully, searching for the calculated charm he'd often employed in business negotiations. Instead, she found only raw honesty in his expression. "What changed?" she asked. Warren's gaze dropped to his hands. "I met someone in Chicago, a woman named Claire. She has a daughter with a rare autoimmune disorder, one of the conditions Hargrove Pharmaceuticals develops treatments for." He looked up, his eyes haunted. "She told me how your company's medication was the only one her insurance would cover, how it had changed her daughter's life, how grateful she was to the Hargrove family for prioritizing affordable treatments over profits." His voice broke slightly. "She had no idea who I was. No idea she was thanking the man who had tried to sell off the division that developed her daughter's medication." Meredith felt a tightness in her chest. "Warren?" "Let me finish," he said gently. "I need to say this." She nodded, waiting. "I've spent my entire career focused on numbers, on growth, on what I thought success looked like," Warren continued. "I convinced myself I was protecting the company's future, but I was wrong. What you and Thomas built, it matters. It changes lives. And I almost destroyed it because I couldn't see beyond quarterly reports and stock prices." He took a deep breath. "I'm not asking to come back to the company. Graham and Olivia are doing an excellent job, but I am asking If there's still a place for me in this family. The vulnerability in his voice, so unlike the confident, sometimes arrogant man she'd raised, brought tears to Meredith's eyes. There will always be a place for you in this family, she said firmly. Always, Warren. No matter what. He nodded, blinking rapidly. Even after everything I did? The embezzlement? The attempt to have you declared incompetent? Even after all that, Meredith confirmed. You're my son, Warren. Nothing will ever change that. Warren's composure finally cracked. His shoulders slumped as the weight of months of isolation and regret caught up with him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, Mother. Meredith crossed the room and did something she hadn't done in years. She embraced her eldest son. After a moment's hesitation, his arms came around her, holding on as if she were a lifeline in a storm. I know, she said softly. I know you are. When they finally separated, both wiping away tears, Eleanor returned with another teacup and a plate of the shortbread cookies Warren had always favored. Perfect timing as always, Eleanor, Meredith said with a watery smile. Welcome home, Mr. Warren, Eleanor said, her usual formality softened by genuine warmth. Warren looked surprised by her greeting. Thank you, Eleanor, and I owe you an apology too, for how I treated you over the years. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. Well, she said after a moment, this is a day for surprises. As she left them alone again, Warren accepted the cup of tea Meredith offered. There are others I need to apologize to, he said. Graham, Patricia, Olivia. They'll be here for dinner tonight, Meredith told him. Patricia and Olivia are flying in for the holidays. Warren hesitated. Would it be all right if I stayed? I mean, if they're comfortable with it. Of course, Meredith said without hesitation. Your room is exactly as you left it. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping tea and watching the snow fall outside. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild. Relationships damaged by betrayal couldn't be mended overnight. But they had taken the first step, and for now, that was enough. Tell me about her, Meredith said after a while. This Claire you mentioned. A soft smile touched Warren's face, a genuine smile that reached his eyes in a way Meredith hadn't seen in years. She's a professor of ethics at Northwestern, he said. Ironic, isn't it? She challenges everything I thought I knew about business, about success. She makes me want to be better. She sounds remarkable, Meredith observed. She is, Warren agreed. She's also the reason I'm here. She asked me what I regretted most in my life, and I couldn't stop thinking about what happened with you, with the family. He set down his teacup. There's something else you should know. I've started a foundation using my savings and investment returns. It provides funding for families struggling to afford treatments for rare diseases. Meredith felt a surge of pride. Warren, that's wonderful. He shrugged, looking embarrassed. It's small, just getting started, but it feels right. Like something Thomas would have approved of. He would have, Meredith assured him. He would be very proud of you. Warren's eyes glistened. Even after everything? Especially after everything, Meredith said firmly. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, to change course, to try to make amends. She reached across the desk to take his hand. Thomas always said the measure of a person isn't in never falling, but in how they rise after a fall. Warren squeezed her hand, his expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about my biological father, too. You never told me much about him. Meredith tensed slightly. There wasn't much to tell. I'd like to know, Warren said quietly. Not to replace Thomas in my heart, no one could ever do that. But to understand where I came from, who I am. Meredith nodded slowly. That's fair. His name was Richard Caldwell. He was brilliant, charismatic, and deeply flawed. We had a brief relationship before I met Thomas. Did he know about me? No, Meredith admitted. By the time I discovered I was pregnant, he had already moved on, and after I met Thomas, it didn't seem to matter anymore. Warren absorbed this in silence. Do I take after him in any way? Meredith considered the question carefully. You have his drive, his intelligence, perhaps some of his ambition. She smiled softly. But your capacity for change, for growth that comes from Thomas, and your ability to admit when you're wrong, I'd like to think that comes from me. Warren laughed, a genuine sound that Meredith realized she had missed desperately. Definitely from you, the great Meredith Hargrove, never afraid to pivot when the situation demands it. The intercom buzzed again. Mrs. Hargrove, Mr. Graham has arrived with Miss Olivia. Warren tensed visibly, earlier than expected. Are you ready for this? Meredith asked gently. Warren took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders. No, but that's never stopped a Hargrove before, has it? Meredith smiled at his use of the family name claimed now, not as a legal right, but as an earned identity. Never, she agreed. Shall we? As they left the study together, Meredith felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced in months. The company was secure. The family legacy would continue through Graham and Olivia, and now, perhaps, the family itself could begin to heal. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the landscape in a clean, white blanket, nature's way of suggesting that even the most scarred terrain could be made new again. A fitting metaphor, Meredith thought, for the fresh start they were all being offered. Not an ending, but a new beginning. For Hargrove Pharmaceuticals, for the family that had built it, and for a son who had lost his way, but found his way home again. As they reached the foyer where Graham and Olivia waited, uncertainty flickered across Warren's face. Meredith squeezed his hand reassuringly. Remember, she said quietly, in this family, there's always a path to redemption. Warren nodded, squaring his shoulders as he prepared to face the siblings he had wronged. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and hard-earned trust, but they would walk it together, as Hargroves always had. And that, my friends, is how I saved my company and my family's legacy, Meredith concluded, her voice strong despite her advanced years. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't pretty. But some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. She looked around at the eager young faces of the business students gathered in the Hargrove Pharmaceuticals conference room. 10 years had passed since that snowy day when Warren had returned home. 10 years of rebuilding, of growth, of healing. The moral of this story isn't about winning at all costs, she told them. It's about remembering what truly matters, about building something that outlasts you, something that makes the world better, not just richer. A young woman raised her hand. Mrs. Hargrove, what happened to Warren after that? Meredith smiled. My son found his own path. His foundation now provides medication assistance to thousands of families each year. He married Claire, and they have a beautiful daughter named Hope. She didn't mention the years of family therapy, the difficult conversations, the slow rebuilding of trust. Some details remained private, even in a teaching moment. And the company? Asked another student. Hargrove Pharmaceuticals continues to thrive under the leadership of my granddaughter Olivia, Meredith said proudly. Graham retired 5 years ago to focus on his own charitable work. And that vascular dementia treatment? It received FDA approval last year. It's already changing lives, just as Thomas always dreamed it would. As the session ended and the students filed out, Meredith remained seated, feeling the pleasant fatigue that came with age and a story well told. A familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Warren, his hair now fully silver, his face lined but peaceful. Another successful mentoring session? He asked, entering the room. I think so, Meredith replied. Though I may have embellished the dramatic confrontation a bit for effect. Warren laughed. You always were a good storyteller. He helped her to her feet with gentle care. At 82, Meredith moved more slowly these days, though her mind remained as sharp as ever. Ready for the board meeting? He asked. Though Warren had never returned to an operational role at Hargrove Pharmaceuticals, he had eventually accepted a position on the company's charitable foundation board, a role that suited his evolved priorities and allowed him to contribute to the family legacy in his own way. Always, Meredith replied. Though I'm looking forward to dinner afterward more. It's not often we get everyone together these days. As they walked slowly toward the boardroom, Warren offered his arm for support. I've been thinking about writing down the full story someday, he said, for future generations of Hargroves, so they understand where they came from, the mistakes and the triumphs. Meredith looked up at her eldest son, the boy she had protected, the man who had nearly destroyed everything, and the person who had found redemption in his own way. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said warmly. Every family has its secrets and its struggles, but it's how we overcome them that defines us. Warren nodded thoughtfully. That's the real Hargrove legacy, isn't it? Not the company or the fortune, but the values, the resilience, the capacity to change and grow. Exactly, Meredith agreed. And that's a legacy worth protecting at any cost. As they entered the boardroom where the extended family waited, Meredith felt a profound sense of peace. The empire she had built would continue long after she was gone. But more importantly, the family she had fought so hard to preserve would endure stronger for having been tested, more compassionate for having faced their own flaws, and united by the understanding that some bonds transcend biology, business, and even betrayal. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all.